welcome back to another episode of the Crazy Stupid Marketing Show, the show where we talk about some of the crazy stupid things people do in marketing and how we can not do that and do instead really awesome, sustainable, authentic marketing things that work to build our business brand. And in order to do that, we have all these amazing conversations with marketers of all shapes and sizes. And today I'm super excited to have Stuart here with me because Stuart is bringing out our scientific side. And so much so I'm wearing a lab coat because I have full intention of experimenting today. So as we get into the conversation today about the science of marketing or in marketing or whatever I titled the show, the science part of marketing, I want you to put on your scientific hat. These hats, you remember when we were in school and we would have like all the experiments with the little Bunsen burners? And I don't know, one of my favorite things to do when I was in school was to do the like the tests where you would have the different elements and see what color they burned. I remember doing that in junior high at some point. It's fun. It's supposed to be fun to experiment. And so we're going to bring that back into our realm of being when it comes to marketing. How can we bring a little bit more of this scientific experimentation mindset back into our marketing to get to the places where we're actually trying to get to? Hello, Andrew. Thank you for joining us. And anyone else who is joining us live, please pop your name in the comments. Let us know that you are here. And also, this is our opportunity to get into this conversation as a community. So if you are here and you're watching live and you have thoughts or questions or your own insights or perceptions or anything, we would love to hear your voice in the conversation because it makes it more robust conversation for all of us. And guess what? It adds to the experimental vibe of the entire conversation. So please share your voice. We'd love to hear your perspectives as well. So as always, I am not here by myself because that would be really boring. It wouldn't be a conversation. It would just be me talking. I would find it boring. You might find it interesting, but me not so much. Oh, Kristen, hello, my friend. Long time no see. It's great to see you here. I am here with Stuart, and Stuart has some amazing background. I would love for him to share with us this scientific value builder. So Stuart, can you share a little bit more about who you are, your journey, and what has brought you to this scientific value builder persona?
Yeah, do you want me to start by showing the picture that I showed you?
Yes, I do.
Guys, this is really me. Yes, it's really me. I don't know if you can see that at the moment.
I think I can do it.
There,
I don't know if I can zoom in, but you guys might be able to zoom in.
I might be able to zoom in. So yeah, this is me about 1 million years ago. A very young scientist. I was a genuine, honest to goodness scientist working in labs for about the first 12 or 15 years of my career after I finished at universities and what have you. And that's me in a laboratory. Yeah, thank you very much, Kristen. That was very good of you. Hi, and this I was just saying to Tracy, this head here is now a really important professor, and is doing some really important work with a really big lab group somewhere in the United States of America. And at the time, he and I just used to get drunk together. So I'm not going to say anything more about that. That's me, very young. And that's why I call myself the scientific value builder, because I applied all of those scientific principles that I learned as that scientist about how to make my experiments highly repeatable, how to do experiments which were controlled so that I actually could interpret and understand how to make progress, having learned something from an experiment. So I took all of that and I went, okay, if I'm leaving, as I did, my scientific career, I want to apply all of those rules, all of that training to the way I worked in business. Now, for a number of years, I didn't actually apply those rules, and my business was crazy. Things used to just happen by accident because I thought that because I was now left science, I didn't need any of those rules. I could throw all of that away. I didn't need to worry about it. I could just do what business people did, and that was they were were impulsive and they were crazy, like Tracy, and they just did stuff, and stuff happened because you were doing stuff. And it meant that the people I was working with, the business I was working with, were unpredictable. Things just happened, and you'd never know. Well, that was great. I want to do that again, but we don't repeat that. We just do it, and it really didn't help my businesses. And eventually, after 2 years of trying to do this, I thought, well, wait a minute. I used to be a really good scientist. I made really good discoveries. I was asked to go and speak at conferences, so I must have been doing something right. So why don't I take a lot of the lessons that I learned then and apply them to what I'm doing now? So what did we do? I realized two things, one of which is partly science is kind of almost boring. Yeah, you make some great discoveries, but you don't do them by doing crazy things. You do very controlled things. You do an experiment and you have A plus B equals C. And then eventually you go, well, what would happen if I had A plus B plus C? Would that make D, or would it make something else? So you don't change A and B. You add something, but you don't change what you've already got. And I started doing that in business. Okay. So I have a lead generation system. I want to make it better. I better not change what I'm doing. I keep that bit of the lead generation, and I add something. Oh, did that make it better or worse? No, it made it worse. Okay, let's take that thing that I've just added away and let's put another thing in and see if that makes it better or worse. Now, to do all of that, as you know, Tracy, you have to be measuring. You have to be measuring things. You have to be looking and saying, okay, what does that mean for the way in which this is being built? Does it? What should I be measuring? Are they the right thing? So a lot of that scientific stuff that I did, I started to apply in business. I started measuring things. I started making sure that I wasn't doing just crazy stuff. I would add and then subtract, do scientific experiments with my marketing. I would look and then sort of also think to myself, if I want this to be sustainable and I want to be able to make sure that this works the way it should every single time, what else did I do as a scientist? I would write it down so that I could repeat what I did. So I would make sure that I had really detailed notes about what was going into the sort of various formulas of my lead generation, or my marketing, or my delivery of my product. And I made sure that I could repeat it because I knew exactly what happened at each stage. So I started doing things like that. And that's kind of been the success that I've now brought to a lot of the businesses I work with today, Tracy. We actually start saying, how do we measure? What do we want to measure? How do we make sure that we're measuring the right thing? And then once we're measuring it and we're getting it right, what do we do to ensure that consistency so that we can repeat it again and again and again? And what we don't end up with is something that you go, that was great, I'd love to do it again, but I had no idea what I did. It was completely chaotic. I had no idea. I'd love to do it, but I didn't know what was going on. And so we brought that, and I brought that control into things. And as a result, I started to see business grow. I started to see better lead generation. And after I brought all that sort of discipline, we started to see the sort of results that I wanted to see. And, I learned two things in this. One, I got consistency, which was great. But the other thing that was really brilliant is when it came to selling that business, the fact that it was all documented, the fact that it was all under some sort of control, people would go, oh, great, that makes it even more valuable. I don't have to do that job when I buy the business. It's really useful to be able to turn around and go, I can show you exactly what happens at each stage. I know exactly what works and what doesn't. Oh, and by the way, I actually have got the evidence because I can show you all the failures. And it's a really valuable way of getting somebody to the stage where they go, well, if I want to be able to sell this business, I've got great documentation that shows how everything works. Does that make sense?
Oh, yes. And I have like all of the things written down.
I'm so sorry. Yeah, I'm so sorry. That was my first mind dump of the evening. So I'm sorry about that. I will stop doing it. But that was kind of
you won't. It's fine.
That's how I brought the science to the business, and it worked. It really did.
Well, and there's just so many things I want to talk about here. So there's a really interesting connection that you made that I think probably a lot of people are not making, is that your failures are the evidence.
Oh yes.
And I think I would hesitate to guess that in marketing, people are not assuming that their failures are evident. So I would love to hear more on that
Oh, Tracy,
topic.
thank you. Listen, okay, so yeah, no, not just in marketing, in every element of your business, the failure is the one that you learn most from. I had at one stage working for me, built a company. There were 600 of us in the company. 120 of those people were directly responsible to me. And one of the things I used to say to every single one of them was, I don't mind if you make a mistake, just learn from it. Because failure as evidence, thank you, Jamie, failure as evidence, you know, it was, I think it might have been Edison. I think I'm going to get it wrong. Somebody's going to write in and say I got it wrong.
It was a scientist.
I think it was Edison, who, when he was trying to do something and the experiment failed, he immediately got up from the explosion that happened and started writing. And his assistant said, "What are you doing? It didn't work." He said, "Yes, but if I ever want to do that again, I now know how to do it." And that's the kind of way that we used to do this. We would do things and they wouldn't work. And I would turn around and say, "Okay, guys, nobody's going to get fired, but what did we learn from it?" And somebody would say, "Well, that really upset somebody there, and this really didn't work because somebody didn't engage with it." I go, "Terrific. Those are things we don't do next time. We know now that's not the thing to do. So what is it we should do? Let's look for something else." So, you know, we used to make mistakes. And I can remember having these discussions with people who would not want to admit a mistake to me. And I'd go, "Look, I really don't care if we have wasted thousands of dollars. I want to know what you've learned from it." Because a baby does not learn to walk by sitting on their backside and going, "I can see everybody around me walking, so therefore I now, once I've got what they're doing, I'll do it." You know, you've had this experience. A baby gets up and the first few steps are wobbly and they fall on their bottom. And what do? They just get up again. So I really would make sure that any failure you took and you identified the root cause and turn around and go, "Okay, that's something we don't do again." So yeah, failure is a huge part of science. It's probably the most important part.
Yeah. Well, I think before we go to Kristen's question, I just want to kind of wrap up this piece about failure, because I think a lot of times in a lot of things, but also in marketing, which is what we're here to talk about today, we assume we're not supposed to fail.
Yeah,
right? If we fail, now we have done that in front of a whole bunch of people, in front of our target clients, and now those people will never buy from us. And so people don't experiment. But what happens when you are that baby who just sits on their backside? I mean, you don't do the thing and you don't move closer to a thing that works for you. Sure, you don't necessarily move farther away from it either, but you have not made it an option for you now. And I think this is a thing that I see a lot when, especially organizations who have had a marketing strategy, their marketing strategy doesn't seem to be doing what it used to do. And so now we just keep trying to like do CPR on our old version of marketing. But the thing about that is that's the baby. That's the baby sitting on its butt. So what are we going to do? And I would just love to hear, like, from your perspective, because I know these are the types of clients that you work with as well. What are some things that you've seen are helpful in, shall I say, getting people excited about failing?
Yeah, so I think there are two things. There are lots of thoughts exploded in my head. And so I'm going to say two things, I think, Tracy. First of which is, this is a mindset thing. People have been taught to be afraid of failure, right, and you have to turn around and give them the possibility, the permission, the joy of failure. So to start with, you know, so many people are afraid of failing, as you said, because they're worried, what will people think? You know, one of the things, and when I started in one business, I can remember somebody turned around to me and said, "You think different." And I said, "Well, what do you mean I think different?" They said, "You're asking all the stupid questions." I said, "No, I don't believe there are any stupid questions. I'm asking questions that nobody else is asking because they're afraid to ask them. I don't care." So I go out there and I go out there and I ask those questions because I don't really care what if somebody says that's a dumb question. I'll go, I'm a dumb person. I mean, I kind of wasn't. I got a degree from a very, very good university with that white coat thing that I had on. It's one of the top 2 in this country. So I can ask a dumb question because I feel confident. So that's the first thing. Let's turn the mindset around. And let's not be afraid of asking those questions, because 90% of the time somebody else is busting to ask it, but they don't. The second thing I'm just going to say, so that's the first thing. Let's embrace failure as a great learning tool. And that's the first. The second thing to say is, when it comes to those failures, the first thing that you've got to do is ask yourself, okay, it failed, but you've got to know why. Because there is no point in having something that's failed that you just go, I'm not going to bother to learn from. I'm just going to start down some different track. And the technique that I always used to have was what I called the 5 whys. People have probably heard about this, but it was revolutionary when I first heard about it. And that was, you ask the question why. But normally when you ask the question why for the first time, you don't get to the very bottom of the why. You get somebody who says, well, it failed because it was the wrong time. Okay, why was it the wrong time? So you're down to your second why. Why was it the wrong time? Well, there was something else going on at the same time. Okay, why did that thing interact with the first thing to make it the wrong time? That's your third why. It's normally when you get to the 5th why that you get to this because of such and such. And that's the time that you sit there and go, that's the thing we need to avoid next time then, isn't it? And it's the identification of that, because too often we don't go to the 5th why. We stop. We go, why did such and such? Okay, that's enough. We don't want to uncover too much because we're not sure what we're going to uncover. But it's when you get down to the 5th why, when you've pulled aside all the dirt, you've really got down to the base, and there you can see it. That's when you go, okay, that's the thing that you need to focus on next time. Thank you, Kristen. Yeah, 5 whys. Remember it. The thing that you don't find out is the real root cause until you've dug a little bit, because the first why is very nearly always not the root cause. It's a symptom of the root cause. The 5th why is normally, I mean, you do sometimes get to it in the 4th, but let's go with the 5. Let's go right down until such
sometimes
time
it might take 6 or 7.
Yeah, but you keep going until such time as somebody says, well, that's the end. That's the reason. Terrific. Now you know. Learn from that. Don't for goodness sake stop until you've got to the bottom. Did that answer the question? I've forgotten what the question was.
Yes, totally. And I think that this is actually kind of ties back to what you said about the joy of failure. I think the learning and the opportunity to do something better next time is the joy. And it's something that I've always found very interesting, because it's a little bit more fun to get it wrong, because then there's something to learn. Whereas if you just get it right the first time, it's nice, but well, now what?
Do getting it right first time is brilliant. And getting it right first time should be the goal. It should be one of those objectives that you stick down and go, I want to get it right first time. You won't get it right first time until you have gone through some form of failure. But once you've gone through the failure, this is when I come back to now you embed that practice into your now it's the model of the norm, and you don't go away from doing that just because something's come along. You say, no, our norm is this. We have to test if something else would be better before we're prepared to change our norm. And that's, once again, the scientific way. We understand why we're doing something. We've got the base worked out. Now we repeat that and repeat that and repeat that. Yeah, we might want to extend. We might want to change something, but we don't change it just for willy-nilly. We change it for a reason, and we have to experiment and test. And then when we know it's better, because we're measuring, that's when you can do the change.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So good. I want to read some of Kristen's comments here. Not being attached to the failure totally transforms the perspective and experience through the process.
Hey, Kristen, you got it.
Great. And I think that resilience and the power of adapting is built in embracing the failures to become a stronger business and brand. Resilience is a very important thing. Yeah. We want our businesses to be resilient, then we need to build a skill of resilience which means not that we only experience success all the time. That doesn't build resilience. We have to go through that. I don't even like the word fail because it sounds so permanent, right? I did this, it didn't work. This did work, this didn't work. Let's not do that. Let's iterate on that and figure out what can work better in the future. Kristen also has this question. I want to get to it before it's like way back in the comments there. Would love to know your thoughts on what are the key aspects to reflect, identify in the failures.
Well, first one is that 5 whys. That's the way that we actually identify. The other thing is and I think Kristen's got a very good reflect. You have to take time out to do these things. You have to put pauses into your day to day. Now, whether or not that is every month, you take half a day, and there's something that I do is I take half a day and I do what I call my Wowatala. And my Wowatala, WWWTALA, Wowatala. It's a half day that I book out with my team and we do the Wowatala. And the Wowatala is what's working well and what do we want to take a look at. We don't talk about what's failing or what's not working well. We say what's working well. We want to do more of the working well. We want to do more of the WWW. And there are things in the TALA column which we need to take a look at, which we want to actually do experiments to see if we can get them from that column into the WWW column. And reflecting, taking time to ask the question, what is working well? One, we want to celebrate those, but it's the literally carving out half a day. It's 4 hours once a month. Anybody can get 4 hours once a month. I sit down with the marketing team and I say to them, right, what's working well? Okay, we've got a list of things. It's ever so easy. This. Okay, what is it that we want to take a look at? This hasn't worked as well. We expected 90% engagement. We've only got 40. Okay, let's take a look at that. What do we know? And we want to look at that and go, okay, that was an experiment. Let's run an experiment different and see what we can do next month to bring that over into the what went well column. So it is a time-taking placeholder in the diary to reflect. And you can't do it if you're running all the time. You have to stop.
Yeah, and I think I feel like this is a theme we come back to in this show, is slowing down and taking time to figure out what are the meaningful things. Because I know I'm not the only person who's participated in a marketing team where we did a lot of stuff, but the stuff questionable as to how meaningful it was for the organization. And the thing that's always interesting to me is I've worked in really big companies. I've worked in really small companies. I've seen some people in really big companies who are very fine with just floating along and doing not very much and being fine with that. I'm not one of those people. I like to see that the work that I'm doing and the effort that I'm putting in is having a result from a business perspective. So It's nice that you want to pay me the salary to do this work, but why am I doing it if it doesn't have any benefit to the business? And so I want to go back to this like measuring what matters component, because I think, again, I'm just going to use my own personal experience, that in marketing, we measure a lot of stuff that doesn't matter.
Yes, we do.
So, Stuart, do you have any good examples of like a campaign that someone was running and they were measuring something that was completely irrelevant, and then we switched the measurement and it made a big difference?
Yeah, I actually did this with somebody. They've got a supplies business, office supplies business. They had this. And it broke my heart that that I got involved with this office supplies business. They should be making money because they've got a good product, they've got a great work ethic. They're really sort of putting the effort in to deliver over and above to all their customers. So they should be making money because their customers should be happy. But they were really failing to bring in new customers. And so I sat down with Matt and I said, okay, let's talk through your lead generation system. And he turned around to me, he said, well, we don't do very much. We just do posts on social media. And my answer was, okay, that's great. What are you measuring? He says, I measure how many likes I get. I said, how many of those likes turn into business? He said, I don't know. I don't measure that. I said, okay, so what could we do? And so we started with a simple trackable call to action. You know, the simplest of, let's have a look at how many people click through. And this was something that I said, okay, start with, do you have something on there which takes them to your website? If you're talking about a product, do you have anything on there which says, if you're giving them some advice about how they should be buying certain things in certain situations, that they actually go through? Oh no, he said, I don't put anything like that in the post. I just tell them we've got one of these things, and they find their way to my website and buy it. I mean, but apparently you don't know if they do. So we just did a simple call to action at the bottom of the social post. If you want to learn more, you can find it here in our catalog. If this is something of interest, and you just started measuring whether or not, and so we started looking at that, and we discovered that virtually none of the people that were looking at these posts that were liking them did anything with them. So we had to ask the question: one, was he wasting his money with these posts? That was the first thing. Apparently he was. It wasn't going anywhere. The second thing that we started to do was I started to say to him, okay, what would make a difference? What should we be doing? And he went, well, we've got these new items. So, okay, let's talk about the new items, not some of the stuff they've seen. So we started talking more about the sort of the new items and giving practical advice about how to use these items in certain circumstances. Now, engagement went up, but also people took action, because what he was trying to do was give them free advice, basically saying, if you're in a situation where you've got this problem, here is something which is a solution to your problem. And by the way, here's a way that you can get the solution that we've just been describing to you. And that drove action. So it turned his mindset away from this passive, I'm hoping things will happen, through to what I was talking to him about was he really needs to put his marketing and sales effort out there as somebody who has a solution to a problem, and he knows how the problem is affecting a particular business, but would then say to them, I've got that solution. I'm willing to help. Here's how I can help. Would you like help? Just turning his mindset away from a passive so-and-so. And I said, look, if you don't like selling, and I appreciated he didn't really like selling. He wasn't a great salesman. I went, just think of yourself as the world's greatest helper. You demonstrate all of that when you're in the process of delivering this stuff anyway, but just become the world's greatest helper and go out there and say to people, if you've got a problem, I know how to help you. Here's the solution. Would you like help? And it did. It revolutionized. We started getting people clicking on those links. We could see those links turning into inquiries, and it became something that he started then to track. Mm-hmm. Now he's doing more experiments since that, but the mind shift away from his marketing just being passive to I'm using it as a channel to say I'm helping you with these solutions became his new lead generation system, for want of a better word, Tracy.
Yeah. Well, and I think this is a great example because especially on social media, people get very obsessed with what we all call vanity metrics, but we all give them a huge amount of value, even though we know that they're vanity metrics, and we get concerned about likes and shares and all of these types of things. And there's always, I always say this, if you are making money in your business, you have a funnel, you have a way of getting business. It might not be a sustainable way. It might not be an overly productive way, but you have a way. And this is the thing to start with, right? Is you have a something that you start with, and then we can look at this, ask these questions. What about this is working? What about this is not working? How does your website play a role? How does your social media presence play a role? And you want people in your organization to be more seen. Why? What's the point behind that?
Exactly.
Because there's so much advice on the internet about what you should do from a marketing perspective. And I think we take these things on as truth and say, yes, we should have a podcast. It makes good sense for us to have a podcast. Okay, but why? Why
Yeah,
and for
yeah,
what?
yeah. And Tracy, I mean, you just started my you started my thought process. Then again, we're told we need to go to networking events, and I often say to people when they go to networking events, what have you got out of the networking today? And the answer has often been, I've made lots of new contacts. And then you follow up with, what are you going to do with those? Oh, I'll put them into my email system.
My Rolodex.
And at what stage will you nobody then follows up with those people. I keep saying this to people I work with. I go, how many of those people have you reached out to because they've now forgotten you 6 months later? How many people have reached out and gone said, hey, I'm here, what did we talk about? Do you make notes on those conversations? Very rarely at networking meetings do we cut notes of the people we've met and really sort of drill down into what their problem is and how we can help you. I see so few people go up to somebody within a networking event, and when they're handing over the business card, go, what's the greatest problem you're currently facing in your business? And you get this, I really could do with more leads. I might have a solution for you. Let me give you a call in 2 or 3 days and we'll talk about it. I mean, what other way? I mean, at a networking event, you're going to pick up a conversation where you can sort of have a conversation with somebody about something like that. Or, I'm really struggling to get, going back to my colleague, Matt here, I'm really struggling to get my paper supplies through at the right price at the right time. Let me give you a call in 2 or 3 days, see if I can help you with that. I mean, so few people do that sort of thing at a networking event that it's the simplest way of just having a conversation about what's the problem that I help to solve in businesses. Very few people do it. And it's just a simple, once again, you've got a simple way of measuring that. How many people did I offer help to? How many people did I actually manage to help?
Yeah.
Hey, return on investment of networking.
Well, it's interesting. I don't know if anybody, well, actually, I think he's been to one of my virtual networking events, but anybody who is in the audience who has been to a networking event, this is something that happens all of the time. And even in my events, I encourage people to connect with people, have another conversation, because what we did here today was learn enough about each other to know whether or not you think there's a value in having a further conversation. But I've seen a lot of methodologies that different networking groups do to try and help people stay connected after the fact. But at the end of the day, this comes down to how intentional are you about that activity? And if okay, so I happen to do a no pitch networking, right? So there's no pitches. You can't tell me what it is that you do. It's not allowed. That's for the second call. But the point is to have conversation and to build connections, right? So whether that's, we had this one conversation and there were a whole bunch of people who had pretty drastic attacks with wild animals. And I didn't know that the conversation was going to go there, but this is so interesting. And now it gives me something to remember you by, and it gives me a reason to want to have another conversation with you.
Yeah.
But if I don't follow up and have that other conversation, then what was the purpose of going to the networking event? Because I think a lot of times people assume that the value from the networking event happens in the networking event. I'm going to go and I'm going to give you my business card and we're going to transact. You're going to give me your money today and then we're going to be done. But very rarely does that happen in a networking event. It is a process, shall we say, a marketing funnel that requires you to take an additional step. And I think that, again, this is, if we look at the big picture of marketing or sales or business in general, none of these things are a one and done scenario. You don't just show up and do one activity and then my entire business runs. Even if I am just a marketer and I am focusing just on marketing, I don't just do one thing. I do a combination of things that works or doesn't work. And sometimes it's not even one of those things in the combination that is necessarily bad, but there's something in the combination that doesn't work. And so from a science perspective, I always think about this as a formula, right? A formula either makes water or it doesn't make water. And if I know that I'm here to make water, then I can judge whether or not my formula is doing what it's supposed to do.
And the important thing about that is you've just said there, Tracy, is you've got to know at the beginning if you're out to make water or hydrogen sulfide, because if you're out to make water, you start with certain things. If you're out to make hydrogen sulfide, you start somewhere else. You have to sort of, and it begins, it goes back to Simon Sinek's, start with why. What is
As
your
Jamie shared? Thank you.
Yeah, okay, there you go. You need to understand what you want to get out at the end. You have to know, you have to drive with that intentionality. You have to know what it is you want at the end. If you're just, if I think it was Alice in Wonderland, the quote from that is, depending on where you want to get, it very much depends upon where you start. If you want to be over there, don't start from here. So you really do have to know what it is you've got to be getting out as a result, which is why we go back to as you were saying, about sort of things like networking. People don't know why they're going, so they're wasting their time going. If you're going in order to make a connection, then go with the intention of making a connection. If you're just going to drink the coffee, go to drink the coffee. But don't waste people's time by going there to make a connection and then just drink coffee, because you've not got you're not driving towards your output. You're not driving towards your end goal by taking that action. You want to make water, you start with hydrogen and oxygen. If you want to make something else, don't start with hydrogen and oxygen.
And I feel like when we talk about it from that perspective, it seems pretty simple. But at the end of the day, there's so many. I remember a company I used to work for was very into the Rockefeller habits. And as the management team, we all had to read the Rockefeller habits. We did the one-page strategic plan. We did a whole bunch of stuff that came from the Rockefeller habits. And the thing that I always thought was very interesting was that we're not the Rockefellers. We are living in a completely different age, selling a completely different thing to a completely different industry. So I'm not saying that's not things we can learn from, but I feel like we're trying to make salt with the ingredients for water.
Yeah, quite right.
And it's not as much as we try with those ingredients to make salt. We don't have the right ingredients. And especially when you actually do have the right ingredients around. And so now I'm thinking about baking, because that's usually what I use ingredients for. But if I'm trying to make a pie crust, I need certain things. I need to have flour. I need to have butter. It should be chilled if it's going to make a good pie crust, or flaky pie crust anyway. And there's all these requirements to make a good one. If I have chilled butter, but I leave it on the counter and it gets soft and soggy, it's not going to work the same as it did when it was chilled. So it's not even that I don't necessarily have the ingredients, but that the ingredients are not being used properly in the combination, or they haven't been heated to the right temperature or something. And so again, this is why I think it's so important to have this vibe of experimentation, because I think a lot of times we say, okay, this is what we've been doing. It's not working. It's all trash. Throw it out.
Yeah.
There's usually something in there that is, one, either working, or two, the components needed to make something work for you. And if we ignore all of that and we quickly jump to something that's completely new, then we still don't have necessarily the right inputs, and that might fail as well. So it's, whether we want to call it the formula or the ingredients or however we're combining these things, it's a combination of things. It's a DNA sequence.
In the stuff that I talk about, I quite happily talk about formula, because for me, if you're talking about saying, if you talk to somebody about what is the perfect client avatar, I quite happily say there's a formula behind it. It's about the identity. It's about the traits. It's about refining them. That's the perfect client. So for me, it's a series of components which comes together in a formula. If you say identity plus traits plus refinement equals avatar, That's a formula, and you have to put all three of those ingredients in. Otherwise, you don't get the right output. And if
Fact,
you
people, how many of you are forgetting the refinement in that? Just saying.
and if you don't do all three, you get the wrong output. So you've got to put them in, and sometimes there is an order. The refinement is last, because the first things you put in, and then you look at it and go, wait a second, we've forgotten, or wait a minute, that's not enough detail. So you have to do them in an order. So yeah, it's a formula. It's absolutely a formula. I don't mind talking about formulas, because formulas were my life for a long time. I used to make up reagents on the bench and do all sorts of things. I had formulas all over the place, but it's a formula. And if you don't do the formula with all of the steps in the right order, you get the wrong result. Quelle surprise when it all goes wrong.
Unless you're Harry Potter with his potions book with the notes in it. Then you're breaking all of those rules, but that's fine. That's an outlier. I want to share Jamie's comment here about don't waste people's time by. Don't forget that you're wasting your own time.
Oh, very good
you're
point,
not
Jamie.
doing it with intentionality. And I mean, I would like to say that I see a lot of intentionality in marketing, but I think actually one of the reasons behind this show is that I don't see a lot of intentionality.
Do you, Tracy? Do you honestly see a lot of intentionality? Maybe
No,
in some of
that's
the
what I'm
marketing you're
saying.
doing.
Well, I mean, I try to be intentional, but when I look at a lot of things, especially if I'm looking at the digital experience a lot of B2B brands are creating, is this intentional, folks? And what's the intention? Is the intention to just, we need to be honest with ourselves. Our intention is just to post something every day. Why is that? 5 whys. Why is that our intention? Why do we feel like that is going to be impactful? Because these things are not having impact. And I think we're to some degree deluding ourselves into believing that we're doing these things with intentionality.
I'm going to be slightly controversial and say most of what I see in too many businesses is lack of intentionality. It's a scattergun approach with this. Somebody has set this. Once again, we go back to that metric. Post something every day. Why? What is it you're trying to do? We have to stay in the public's mind. Really? Is the public there where you're posting? Are they taking any notice of you, or are they just immediately scrolling past you because, boy, they've seen 15 others like it? I'm sorry to have to say, too much of this is just a metric devised by somebody that just wants to justify their seat. I see an awful lot of people in marketing roles who just think they have to do something.
Yep.
And they'd be better off going back to the formula and saying what is the right thing to do in the right order to get the result we really want. And it comes back to that thing we were talking about earlier, which is stop and pause, take stock, measure the right thing, work out what you're trying to do, go back to the formula and start again.
Well, and I think, again, in marketing, because there's a lot of talk about consistency and frequency, and this is what you have to do to take advantage of the algorithms. And so we get caught up in like doing the things. We don't step back and say, okay, so I've been posting on social media every day for the last 3 months. And what has it done for me?
Yeah, agreed. Absolutely agreed. Yeah, absolutely agreed.
And even if you're like, I feel like from a business perspective, I will be honest with you. I have had clients where I mostly cut off their social media. And I'm like, this is an experiment. Does this have any impact on your business whatsoever?
Agreed. Absolutely agreed.
Because if you stop doing it and it has no impact on the business, it wasn't having any impact on the business, but except from a positive perspective. But you do have people spending time on this. You do have an expectation that it's delivering something. And the important thing here is that we reformulate that to say, okay, there's actually no pressure on our social media because our social media is delivering nothing. So could our social media deliver something? Yeah, it could. What do we want it to deliver? Let's have a conversation about that. Let's try some things that can test whether or not it's delivering that. Do we want this to be about conversations? Are we getting in conversations? Or are we just publishing white papers and brochures and all of these things that people expect us to have because we're a company, but it's not doing anything. What are we doing here?
Yeah, and just to extend it a little bit, Tracy, and I don't want to turn this into a 3 hour thing, but I can't help but thinking a lot of people don't link how the customer experiences them to what they portray as their marketing when they first encounter a customer. Let me give you an example. I was talking a little bit about Matt and the branding stuff that he's doing. I came across one of his competitors because I was sort of trying to help work out some of what he was doing. The competitor put out this brilliant proposition, this brilliant stuff on marketing, basically promised the earth, but delivered absolute crud. Sorry, is that a word? Let's assume Let's assume you can work out what I mean.
Yes. It was no good, folks.
That'll do. The problem was that the delivery absolutely destroyed what they'd promised, and the problem with that is that when you don't live up to what you set as your expectation. So what am I trying to say? I'm trying to say that marketing shouldn't just be something you present to the outside world. It should go through your entire business. It should basically be, going back to what you said, the DNA of what you do to exist. Because if it doesn't, if what you don't deliver is what you've promised up front, nobody will buy from you ever again. And in fact, the word will spread about the fact that you don't deliver. So for whatever else you do, make your marketing message embedded within your operational delivery, within everything else your business does. Because if you don't, you will be destroying all the work that the marketing people are doing for your business with simple stuff that you can fix. And I really keep coming back to that because so many businesses think somehow marketing is over there doing stuff and the rest of the business does something over here. And it isn't true. Marketing should be doing something here and the delivery of your product should be here. They should match.
Yeah. And I am 100% behind that. And whether it's going to get broken in sales or lack of client success or operations or delivery or wherever, your brand is one thing. Every part of the experience that someone touches is a brand experience for them. And while marketing might in a lot of scenarios be responsible, quote unquote, for the experience, I will tell you, from a marketer's point of view, it is one of the most angering things when I make a promise and it does not get held up down the line. Because you know what that makes me want to do? Not make that promise. I would rather give people an accurate representation of what they're going to get so their expectations are met and therefore they are not disappointed than make promises that I can't keep. And it's honestly, that's another thing that confuses me. I've seen that happen in a lot. And like small business solopreneurs too, making all these big promises. And you're like, dude, do you have any intention of like keeping those? Because if you don't, that's a reputation issue. And you might attract someone one time, but that is not going to be sustainable and scalable, which is what we're here to talk about. So before we run out of time, I just wanted to go because Gen X stepped in here right at the end, asking a question about any suggestions for small indie YouTube channels. So any thoughts on what a small YouTube indie channel might want to experiment with?
Hey, do you know, I've got one and you've got one, Tracy. What else can I say?
Go for it. Oh, you want me to go first?
No. I've got a YouTube channel. You've got a YouTube channel. Oh. They're brilliant.
Check out our YouTube channels and see what we do. You know what? So here's the thing. One of the things I like about what you're sharing, Gen X, is that it's a small indie YouTube channel. And I will tell you personally, I have people all the time who come and tell me how they can help me fix my YouTube channel. And I tell them, I have a YouTube channel as a reference library for all the content I create. I know it's not optimized. I'm not intentionally trying to optimize it. This is what it is right now. And I'm really happy with it. So I think one of the things that comes up for me first is, what's your goal for your small indie YouTube channel? Is it to be a small indie YouTube channel? What does that look like in terms of subscribers or participants or conversations? What does that look like? And thank you for liking my Lord of the Rings poster. I like it too. It actually came from New Zealand, fun fact. But one of the things that I think most people who have seen the show know about me, and even as Stuart said at the beginning, I'm kind of all like, let's try it, let's go. He's more of the controlled experiments kind of guy, which is why we're compatible.
I would be more than happy to let you go, but just start with one pause, set out what you're trying to do, then go for it like crazy.
This is what I do. And then come back to the pause, right? Because I think
Always
this is
come
the
back.
other thing where you get caught up, is that like I'm an ideas person. I have ideas about things all the time. There was actually a part in my entrepreneurial journey where all I did was shoot off ideas, and I would not debrief. I would not figure out what I liked about those things, figure out what other people liked or didn't like about those things. I would just like constantly try new things, like trying on clothes. I'll just try them on until something finally fits. Except what helped more, I'm going to use a clothes example on this, because when I worked in corporate, I had this mindset about how dress pants had to be uncomfortable. Dress pants are supposed to look good, but not be comfortable. Maybe it's a girl thing. But anyway, that was my definition of dress pants. Then when I went back, like after COVID, and I'm like going, and I'm like, okay, well, I'm a mom. I want to be able to squat down in my pants, right? This needs to be a thing. And so I went and I started looking for dress pants that look nice, that fit comfortably, that I can do a full squat to the floor in. That's my own definition of comfort. You make your own definition of comfort.
I don't know
But
where
you know
this is
what?
going. I'm doing my level best to stay with this one.
You know what I found? Dress pants that fit, that I can squat to the floor in. They exist. They exist because I started looking for them. And so the moral of the story is that sometimes when we're just throwing out ideas and quote unquote trying stuff on, but we don't know what we're looking for, we can't find the fit. We don't know what we're looking for. We can't figure out if it fits us in the way we want it to or not. And sometimes we can't figure out the fit we want until we've tried on some things. And so it's kind of it's a whole relationship. We think about a thing. What might I want this to be? I try it. I come back. Think about, okay, what about that worked? What about it didn't? Okay, this worked. Let's try this with that and see if that works better. And it's a continual journey that we go on, an evolution. And it helps us get better clarity on where we're trying to go and the fit we're trying to make. So that's where I went with that long convoluted story. But if you don't know you're looking for comfortable pants you can squat in, you probably aren't going to find comfortable pants you can squat.
I'll try and remember that analogy.
It's just as like personally relevant to me, so this is why I think it's a good story. Andrew is sharing, I do think we need to build rapport. I told once that if you build rapport and are genuine, people will be more willing to work with you and more willing to buy from you. And I think we say people buy from people.
I'm not going to disagree.
Right.
You have a point.
And this is even interesting though too, because I think this is where it's interesting to test your intentionality from a marketing perspective. Is it your marketing's job to build rapport?
Agreed.
Right? Because the answer might be yes, the answer might be no. Personally, mine content is created for that. It's not the right answer necessarily, but if you know, like Andrew, I know you. This is who you are, this person. So if you showed up and you were not trying to build rapport, it probably would be weird.
Yeah, great.
And probably not sustainable and probably not scalable. And this is the thing, again, when we look at marketing from a growth perspective, whether or not you're a small entrepreneur and trying to grow, or you're a business who is trying to grow, I'm getting too excited. This is where all of the foundation lies, is in what you would do and how you put that puzzle together so that it can be scalable, so that it can be sustainable. Because if it's not sustainable, this is not scalable, folks.
I like the thinking.
Okay, we didn't even get to talk about hypotheses. I was really excited Mark, okay. I want to talk quickly, Stuart, about hypotheses, because every time I think of science, I think about having a hypothesis. And I'm like, I hypothesize that something is going to happen because I do something. So I wanted to just get your quick opinions on marketing hypotheses and how they might be used.
Now, let me tell you a story. One particular piece of research I did involved where I expected a virus to turn up in a body, and my hypothesis was that when I did a particular experiment, I would find the virus there. This was part of my research. I did the experiment, and I made sure I did the experiment very well so that I could interpret the results. And the virus turned up not only where I found it, but somewhere else as well. Now, that was unexpected. The secret was when I presented this at a conference, people said, that's unexpected. Why do you think that is? I said, at the moment, I have no answer, but I know my result is right because of the way in which I did my experiment, which means I can interpret it. In marketing, it's the same thing. You think you're going to get a particular result. You may or may not get it. The secret is to have done the experiment, to have done your marketing in such a way that you can truly interpret it. That is, you can look at the result you got and go, it didn't turn out the way I wanted, but I know that if I do it again, I'll get the same result, which I may or may not want. And I know that if I change one thing, I can measure the difference I get in my result. The secret is your hypothesis can only be tested if you control the way you do things and you know how you did it in which order. And that just comes back to what we were saying. So coming back to what we were talking about earlier, the secret to all of this stuff, do it in an order with intention. Make sure you know why you're doing each step. And if you don't get the result you want, don't change everything. Change one thing, do it again and see what happens.
Well, that was a perfect wrap up for the end of the show. So, Stuart, if people are wondering more about you and want to stay in the conversation of marketing experimentation with you, where's the best place for them to find you?
You can find me on all the socials, but go to the-complete-approach.com. You'll see my stuff there. You'll see blogs, YouTube channels, podcasts. Tracy's been on one. You'll get Tracy. And you can find it all there at the-complete-approach.com.
Awesome. Thank you, Stuart, so much for joining us today. I feel like we could experiment for a very long time, but we're going to let that be the episode for today. Thank you to Andrew and Gen X and Jamie and Kristen for joining us in the conversation today. You guys had some really amazing bits of feedback and questions for us. So thank you so much for sharing your voice on this topic. And if you're new to the show, you won't have heard me say this. If you're not new to the show, you hear me say this every episode. But if being in this kind of marketing science mindset is something you're trying to focus on, stay in the conversation. This isn't the type of thing where we just like have a 60-minute conversation and we solve the world's problems, although that would be wonderful. It just doesn't work that way. So connect with me, connect with Stuart, connect with each other in the chat and stay in the conversation. And you know what I'd be super excited to hear about? If any of you are doing, especially Gen X, because you asked the question, if anybody is doing any kind of marketing experiment and they have some results that they would love to share behind the scenes, I know that Stuart and Tracy would also be very excited to have that conversation. So connect with us. We are mostly over, I see Gen X, you are over there on YouTube. We are mostly over on LinkedIn. So come and find us on LinkedIn. We would love to connect there. And Andrew, spoiler alert, he said the whole thing in my wrap-up phrase because he knows. He knows. He's a regular. Thank you, everybody, for joining the conversation today. We are here every Tuesday at 1 p.m. Mountain Time. So come and check us out and stay in the conversation about how not to do crazy, stupid marketing and how to do awesome, sustainable, authentic marketing instead. And until next time, everybody, permission to do you.